Greetings, everyone. I'm Dr. Warren Smedley. This brief video is an introduction to our quality team workshop on gaining confidence in making presentations and facilitating meetings. Today, we're going to go over some basic tips and tricks in preparation for our first in-person meeting next week. The fear of public speaking is actually called glossophobia. There's a name for it. It's the number one fear that most people have. 77% of the population has some level of anxiety regarding public speaking. It's normal, it's natural, everybody has it. A lot of that comes from our fear of being stared at. We actually have learned to see that as a threat. We don't like that. We don't like people staring at us, and it can signal dominance or a threat, and it makes us uncomfortable. Out of that 77%, 7% of Americans actually have a clinically debilitating fear of public speaking. And that clinical debilitation can lead to a decrease overall of wages by 10%, college graduation by 10%, and opportunities for promotion by 15%. Why are we so anxious? Well, as it turns out, 90% of the anxiety we feel before making a presentation comes from a lack of preparation. We can fix that by being prepared, and that's what we're going to do together is work on how do we prepare ourselves to lead meetings and to be prepared for presentations. That will help us reduce our anxiety and make stronger presentations. You probably have seen this somewhere before. What percent of your communication is nonverbal and what part is actual the words that you choose? There's some argument over how effective this particular distribution is, but clearly the nonverbal communication is important. And in this case, in this particular study, only 7% of the words that were spoken, the content itself, impacted the presentation, but over 90%, 93% was affected by the nonverbal communication and your voice, your tone, and your pacing. People pay attention to how you say things. That becomes very important. So if you can dedicate a fair amount of your time to preparation and knowing what your content is, and then also making sure that your nonverbal communication is good, you'll make a stronger presentation. So we are Warren and Linda Smedley, and we've spent about 15 years part-time of our careers working with the Dale Carnegie organization, and we've been sharing ideas on how to make presentations, how to deal with human relation skills, how to improve human relation skills, how to make presentations, how to do supervisory skills, and a variety of other things. So we're going to share those tips and tricks with you over the course of these next couple of weeks. Our learning objectives are to become a more skilled communicator, to build confidence in leading meetings, to learn how to summarize key points in a meeting, to get people to move towards the objective of the meeting, learn how to share your opinion with power. I find this to be particularly helpful especially when you're sharing content about quality improvement or ways to change things that need to be changed. You need to be able to share your opinion on how to do this with strength and conviction. And probably the most challenging thing I've seen is learning how to handle questions and answers. I've been a case competition judge for the last 17 years for the UAB Masters in Health Administration case competition that happens every February. And that's one of the most stressful parts of the entire presentation is when the questions and answers come. These students prepare so well for their content. They're very much in control of their content, but you don't control the questions that get asked, and you don't control the way that the questions are asked. And the people asking the questions expect answers. So learning how to manage that process can take a tremendous amount of stress off of you when you're in front of a group. So the first thing that we need to think about is the purpose of our meeting or our presentation. You need to know your purpose. Presentations and meetings are different. You need to be prepared. As we said earlier, 90% of the anxiety comes from being unprepared, so please don't wing it. We are going to spend some time learning how to talk on your feet. I know that happens. I know that you will go into meetings and be called upon to say things. That happens. But when you have the opportunity to be prepared, please be prepared. Don't wing it if you can avoid it. So you need to ask ahead of time, what's the purpose of this meeting or this presentation? And then focus your uh, all of your energy around achieving that objective. And as we talk about meetings and presentations, it's all about determining what's the objective of that meeting or that presentation. And then everything you do should drive to that particular objective. So ask yourself, what's the purpose of this particular meeting or presentation? Is it to educate or to gain understanding? That's different than trying to gain cooperation from someone. It's different than trying to motivate people to make a change or to take a specific action or to be inspired or to persuade them to do something, to take a side. It's different. And how you structure your material is different. A little side thing I've learned over the years is that in today's world, people want to be somewhat entertained. They don't want to be bored. I call this edutainment. We're educating, but we're trying to do it in a light, lively, and interesting format. So to the extent that you can include light discussion and things, we'll talk about that as we go through, but make it entertaining. People live in sound bites. They live on their social media when they're not at work, and they like to be entertained. We can do that if we think ahead in the context of a meeting and make meetings fun. Know your audience. You have to know your purpose. Now you also have to know your audience because different audiences receive information differently. Prepare your message specifically for that particular audience to the best of your ability, as far as you know. There are lots of different assessments out there, personality and behavior style assessments. This is the DISC profile. You've probably heard of it. You've probably done it. I've done most of the different ones myself. I've actually led some of these workshops myself. And this is a very simple one. I find this to be the most useful and maybe not the most information. It's very skimpy on information, but it's most useful because it's very simple. It has two dimensions to it, up and down and side to side. The dimensions on the DISC profile are, does your audience think fast, make decisions fast, or do they like to think more slowly, take their time, and get lots of information? Then are they people oriented or are they fact oriented? Do they like lots of facts or do they like lots of discussion? And if you can answer those two questions, you'll have a better idea of how to structure your meeting or your presentation. So for example, if we think about directors, people who are directors are fast paced. They want to make decisions quickly. Give me the facts. I'll make a decision. That's typically going to be a CEO type person or an executive. Give me the facts, make a decision quickly. Don't waste a lot of time talking about ancillary things. If you're going to a finance committee meeting or you're asking for money from the budget folks, they're probably conscientious analysts. They're thinking deeply. They want lots of information. They're going to take their time. They need all the detail and all the information. You want to have lots of information for them because they're going to ask for it. If you are talking to people who are extroverted, people who like to talk, they like to be outgoing, typically these are going to be your marketing or your outreach people. Sometimes the sales reps that come to visit you, they're going to be these influencers. They like to think out loud. They like to talk out loud. They do like to talk about what's going on in your world, your people, your family, and make time for that so that they can get engaged. They like to do that. Stabilizers tend to be quieter. They're deeper thinkers. They like to think slowly. They're very concerned about small groups, about people and fairness. They want people to be fair. They're probably not going to ask a lot of questions, so you need to be prepared to get them engaged in the conversation by asking them questions and pulling them in, particularly pulling them in. These could be your pediatricians, your primary care physicians. They tend to be very people oriented. We'll talk more about this as we go through. A few basic principles about presentations and meetings. Adults need to understand the purpose and objectives of the meeting or the presentation. So to the extent you can tell them ahead of time what to expect, they want to know that. The environment should be friendly, relaxed, multisensory. People learn different ways. Different people learn different ways. That some like auditory, some like to see things, some like to do things, some like to do a little bit of everything. And the more you can mix it up, the better your outcome will be. Adults should be encouraged to participate and accept responsibility for being engaged. So if you just get up in front in a meeting or in a presentation and simply monotone lecture, they will not typically accept responsibility. And so you need to think of ways to engage that particular group and get them involved and participating. Presenters should relate to and make use of audience experience. You're going to be talking to a lot of people. You always talk to a lot of people in this world that have a lot of experience, physicians, surgeons, people who have a lot of experience. So tap into that. You don't have to know everything. You can use the people in the room to help frame and answer the questions that are being asked in the room. PowerPoint, we'll talk about this more in person, but just a couple of things about PowerPoint. This in the business world, it's a little bit more complicated than it is if you're just giving more social presentations. But in general, slides should not make sense without you. So if you send a slide deck to somebody and they understood everything exactly perfectly, then probably you're not needed for that presentation or meeting. You don't need to waste their time. So a presentation is better when the presentation is what you're providing and the slides support what you're saying or providing rather than being the actual presentation. We like to say you should think of a 6x6 rule when you're putting your each of your slides together, 6 lines, 6 words per line. The key here is to be as simple and succinct as possible. People get tired, they get weary if they have to read a lot of material on your slides. It's not always possible to do 6x6, and I violated that here with my first bullet point with 7 words. But to the extent you can make it simple, make it simple. Use high contrast, make it easy to see. You have no idea what the room's going to be like. It could be a bright room, it could be a dull room. There could be glare coming through the windows. Use high contrast. Use animations to highlight important facts. And I'm not talking about cartoons. I'm talking about bold or having things pop out on the screen to highlight important facts that you're wanting to emphasize. A word about Excel charts. Don't cut and paste Excel charts into your presentation, because if you do that, it's possible that when you share the PowerPoint, it's actually taking embedded Excel material with it. And you may not be wanting to share all of the backup data, may not be appropriate to share all the backup data publicly with other people. So if you're going to put Excel in, make sure that you do it as an image rather than as the entire Excel chart being embedded into your PowerPoint. Use PDF handouts to support the details rather than putting these minuscule little charts up on the screen. Use a handout, give them a handout. And there's lots of great online resources. I like Lila Garani. She has a great PowerPoint tips site, talks through all kinds of good information. She does a great job with it. You can find it on YouTube. When we get together, we're going to talk about some techniques for making your meetings and presentations better. That's what this is all about. So a couple of the key things. We're going to talk in our first time together about attention-getting openers. Statistically, you only have 10 seconds to get your audience's attention. Whether it's a meeting or a presentation, people are going to tune out very quickly. You've got the first 10 seconds to capture their attention. This is especially true if you're making your quarterly report to the executive team and they've got a 2.5-hour meeting. You've got your 15 minutes embedded in the middle of that somewhere. They're tired, they're distracted, they're hungry, they're thinking about other things. You need to grab their attention so they hear what you have to share. So start with an attention-getting opener. So there's a couple different things we're going to suggest here, and we'll talk about them when we get together. A compelling story. This always works well. This is my favorite. I'll talk about that again in a second. A startling statement or a fact. something that is extreme or unusual that they need to know about. A question based on some need or interest that you know is important to that particular topic, or a current event or an incident, something that, again, it catches their attention. You're trying to catch their attention and draw them in so they hear what you have to say. It's got to be brief. You don't want to ramble. You're not going to do 5 minutes of introduction. It's got to be 90 seconds or less. So think very short, very brief, but you do want to catch their attention. So my favorite way to do this is a compelling story. Our friends at St. Vincent's do this particularly well because they look for opportunities to highlight patient stories, family stories, associate employee stories that are inspiring, compelling, and help us to understand the point you're trying to make. So if it's appropriate, choose a brief yet compelling story to share. It should have a sense of feel good to it that supports the mission and makes your audience feel proud. They want to be glad to be associated with an organization that has this kind of a positive impact. Emphasize a favorable patient outcome or highlighting the quality and commitment of your team. You can start your meeting with this story. You can actually weave the story in across the course of your meeting or your presentation as well, kind of come back to parts of it, sort of the rest of the story, like the Paul Harvey radio thing used to be. Keep it brief, 90 seconds or less. We're also going to talk at the first meeting about tips for making your summarizing your meetings, summarizing key points, and pulling people through to actually achieve the objective you set for that particular meeting. So imagine your meeting or your presentation as a river, and there's a bridge that you're going to take your audience over. You're going to take them from one side of the river, which they know, where they know they're comfortable, they understand it, this is the known to them, but you're trying to take them across to the unknown. And this would be your objective or your goal. So this is what they have to learn and understand and embrace. We're going to start with an observation. So you can start by asking people, what did you see? What happened? Tell me the facts. Go through specifically what actually happened. Just recite what you observed, and then talk about what does that mean? What kinds of things can we draw out of that? How can we interpret what we saw? What does that tell us? What did we learn from that? And then the application. How does that benefit us? Where can we use that? How will that prevent future safety issues from occurring in the future? And get the group now to actually do this, say this, and come to learn this and discover it on their own. Observation, interpretation, and application. So to wrap up, there's a quick assignment for our first class together. It'll be short, just a brief assignment, but please come prepared to your first class. And this assignment is around attention-getting openers. So think about your next upcoming or your most recent presentation or meeting. Think about that one. Put that one in your mind over the next week. Then find 3 possible ways to grab the attention of your audience by opening your presentation or meeting with an attention-getting opener. Again, here are the following types of techniques: a compelling story, startling statement, quote, fact, question based on need or interest, current event, or an incident. And we'll talk about this more to make sure you understand it. Write them down, just brief, just very short, very brief, 1 sentence for each of the 3. It'll only take you 10 minutes to do this, but something you should be thinking about in preparation. That's it for this particular introduction. We look forward to being with you on the 21st. Again, I'm Warren Smedley and my wife, Linda. Thank you.